All right, welcome everyone to the very first Elevate Linn County Working Wednesday webinar of our spring series. Today's career readiness webinar and our entire spring series is sponsored by our partners at Selco Community Credit Union. Thank you, Selco, for making this possible. My name is Lizzie Gray and I'm a project coordinator for Connected Linn County. Each Wednesday for the next about 10 weeks, we will be joined by a local professional who will walk us through a new career readiness skill. Joining us today, we have Ross from Dev Northwest. Thank you for being here today, Ross. Would you like to introduce yourself and maybe tell everybody just a little bit about Dev Northwest and what you do at Dev Northwest?
Yeah, so hello everyone. Good to be with you today. My name is Ross Kanagan. I work with Dev Northwest. We're a local economic development organization. We do lots of different things, but specifically with respect to youth, we have our Youth Financial Foundation classes, which we'll talk a little bit about later. It's our hashtag adulting class. I mean, my goodness, when you're leaving high school, there's so many things happening. And then all of a sudden you're responsible for taking care of your money. And so that's kind of some of the things that we talk about in that class. And we'll talk about some of those things today. We have different programs like saving programs. We do a lot of work on housing as well. But the main thing is we offer personal finance classes for high school students just like yourselves.
Thanks, Ross. So wonderful. Before we begin, I would like to invite everyone who's joining us to type in any questions that you have for Ross into the chat box or the Q&A feature. Because this is a webinar, we cannot see or hear you, but we can read your questions and we want to hear your questions. So as Ross is presenting, please type them in. We'll have plenty of time in the second half of the webinar to address all questions. So Ross, take it away.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do today is, like Lizzie said, the best part will be the second half, where we're going to talk about the questions that you have. The first part will be kind of like getting an oil change, kind of talking about some of the foundations, some of the gears of kind of getting your personal finance moving. So really, let me share my screen here, and the first question that I would like to ask, and this is kind of what we're going to talk about real quickly. We're going to talk about budgeting, credit, savings, and loans. Those are four of the most kind of common things that young adults face, especially when you're getting closer to turning 18. But I have a question for you all, in addition to Lizzie's question, and that is, like, what are some goals that you're working towards? So, and what is a money goal that you're interested in accomplishing? And it could be in the next couple of weeks, or it could be in the next couple of years. That will really help me kind of as I frame this conversation with you. So let's get started. So let's talk about a spending plan. At Dev Northwest, we hate to use the B word. We call budgeting the B word. Why is that? Because budgeting sounds so awful. It sounds like a diet. It sounds restricting. It sounds like what you can't do compared to what you can do. But really what a budget is, it's the same thing as a spending plan. It really is something that you can create that can help you make things happen that otherwise might not be possible. So there's a lot of ways that you can manage your money and kind of keep track of where your money's going. But the reason I ask you the goal question is because that is a fundamental piece of a spending plan. A spending plan really comes to life when you're actually trying to work towards different goals in life. So that might be saving for a car, or saving for education, or saving for moving expenses associated with you moving off on your own. The bottom line is, especially when you're in your late teens, there's always goals that are 6 months later and a couple of years later, and it's really helpful to start working on them. So let's talk about the kind of the foundation or the ingredients of a budget. There's really three big ingredients, and that is your needs, your wants, and your goals. So sometimes before we were doing all this Zoom stuff, we would do this activity where I would say something, and I would say, is this a need or a want? Like, is food a need or a want? Probably that's a need. Organic food, is that a need or a want? Well, that might be a little bit different for all of us. So the big thing when you start looking at what expenses that you have when you're starting to live on your own is to figure out what truly are your needs, like the obligations that you have to cover, and then what are things that you want. So like maybe maybe you're a gamer and you want that gamer subscription, but you have to like figure out, is that a need or a want? And the beautiful thing with a spending plan or a budget, I'll use the B word sometimes from now and then, is that you get to decide what a need and a want is. But some of the things like probably getting food, keeping food on the table, keeping shelter over your head, those are things that you just have to usually prioritize up at the top. So you can kind of do it however you want, but usually it looks something like this, is that when you're in school, you might have some income. So that could be in the form of work study. That could be in the form of a part-time job, or maybe you're going straight from high school to your job and you truly are like your full income is, you're working full-time. But then you start think of it kind of like a waterfall where you've got your income coming in, and then the next thing you have to pour that water into is probably your needs, because you got to meet your needs first. And for a lot of us, especially when we're just getting started in our teens, um, you know, that's most of the money. We don't have much space for these other things, but it's important to think about those other things. So look at this. This is interesting. We're bringing back goals again. Goals probably, in classes, I talk with other students and I say, what do you think it should be prioritized above, wants or goals? And most students say, I want to prioritize goals, because think about goals can be needs or wants, but usually they're in the future. And so a lot of times, like if you need to have a car in the future, today it's a goal. And so is there a way that you can build that into your plan? And that's really like at its core, that's what a spending plan is. That's what a budget is trying to make sense of the money that's coming in and the expenses going out. And then of course the goal is to make them match and make them zero, or make even a little bit more positive, more money coming in. Now, I completely understand. Probably you're thinking, well, I'm going off to school, and so like like my expenses are going to be a lot higher than my income, and that's fine. But one thing that I just want to stress with you all is that when you start looking at different schools, they'll offer you different financial aid packages. Just be really careful. I mean, financial aid can be really helpful, but remember that in some of that financial aid is grants, some of that financial is maybe scholarships and grants, but some of it is loans. And so the less that you can take out of loans, the better your financial future is. So just because a school presents you with a certain financial aid package doesn't mean you necessarily need to take all of it, especially if you're going to be using some of it for living expenses. It can be really smart to actually try to work a part-time job so that you can at least cover some of your day-to-day living expenses without the aid package that you've got. So just a little bit more specifically, you've got your income coming in on a spending plan. So that is, with a spending plan, we're looking at our net income. That's like literally the take-home pay. The gross income is the income that if you're working and you're making $10.50 an hour, and if you multiply $10.50 times the number of hours you work, that's your gross income. But the net income is what we're concerned with. That's your paycheck. So we're looking at our income plus any resources that we might be utilizing. So we might be, we might have, some other, maybe we have SNAP, or maybe we are doing some sort of side gigs, like we're doing some yard care or whatever and making some income on the side. All those resources are part of the income piece. And then the monthly needs, probably that's going to be things like housing, especially if you're going to rent an apartment on your own. Remember, you got to keep in mind that you also, in many cases, have to pay for utility and trash and internet and all these other expenses. And then of course your groceries and transportation costs are probably going to go up. They're going to be a lot higher than when you were living at home. So all of a sudden, this is like the tough part about hashtag adulting, is your expenses go up far greater than they were when you're living at home. So if you have a job and you're living at home, that's a perfect opportunity to try to stash a little bit aside for some of these goals. So then of course goals. So it could be like very specific goals. Like in this example, we said saving for a car or saving for dental hygienist school, but it also could be like, hey, I'm trying to get a Nintendo Switch or the new PlayStation. I mean, goals can be both fun, but then they can also be practical, and it's up to you to kind of determine what you want to prioritize. And then monthly wants are the things that when you've thought about it, you're like, you know what, that's something that I really enjoy, but I don't think I need it necessarily. So we want to still have those in our spending plan, but not necessarily at the very top of the waterfall. So let me actually just check in to review. So with a spending plan, we're thinking about what are our goals, and then trying to make sense of the income coming in and the expenses going out. And usually we start with thinking about what are the needs first, and then what are what are our wants. Okay, so let me go back to the slides. Thanks for letting me toggle around here. So there's also cool resources that you can use. Like you can use apps, that help you track this. A good first place to go is your credit union or your bank. Usually they have online tools there, but there's other free resources. A couple on here are like are Mint and Fudget, but then a lot of people really like youneedabudget.com or YNAB. And then once if you ever get a .edu email address at a community college or a college, you'll be able to access that app for free. Okay, and so this is kind of what they look like, is they give you, if you're like a visual learner, they give you kind of a picture of how your money is being spent. And I really love, they have a green light, red light premise where, like, if you're trying to say, hey, I want to only spend X amount on groceries, and you set that amount, then if you go over it, it'll turn from green and then to yellow when you're at the number, and then it'll hit red. Okay, let's take a deep breath. And now we're going to jump into talk about credit. Like I said, I hope you're doing all right out there. This is a really fast-paced first half an hour because there's a lot we're trying to cover. But I will definitely get to questions that you have, in about 15, 20 minutes or so. So credit basics. So we've all heard about the credit score and your credit reports, but what are these things? Well, credit is basically your ability to obtain something based off of the trust of repayment. One activity we do in our class is I'll sometimes ask somebody like, hey, can I borrow your bicycle? And they're like, what? You can't borrow my bicycle. I don't even know I don't know you. And I'm like, what? We've actually been in like 2 classes together. And like, so would you now lend it to me? And they're like, no. And so the reason is because usually when you're trying to access credit, the person on the other side of the equation doesn't know you, and they're trying to make sense of would they feel comfortable lending to you. Now, what we know about credit is that's how credit originated. But today, credit has kind of infused in so many different areas of our life. Like, think about it. If you're trying to rent an apartment, they're going to look at your credit. So it's not just necessarily about accessing loans and getting better rates, which is what credit was traditionally, but now it's just being able to access things like the rate that you pay on your car insurance. And so it's really important, especially as you're approaching age 18, is to start with some kind of firm footing, like do some things that will help you build your credit. And I think there's some questions that we can, that maybe I can answer some questions about some first steps to building your credit. But really, there's a couple key pieces of your credit. One is your credit report, and second is your credit score. The first thing, your credit report, the best way to describe it is kind of like in school, like your transcript. It's basically a record of certain financial transactions that are being reported to these things called the credit bureaus. There's these 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, and they're like a filing cabinet. They keep a record of stuff like if we get a car loan payment and we're paying on time, it'll keep a record of those sort of things. And so what we can do is once a year we can go to this government authorized website, annualcreditreport.com. And actually right now during COVID, you can go each week and check your credit for absolutely free. They're not going to, if you go through this website, they're not going to try to sell you anything. There's other, of course, resources like Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, but of course they're using your data and ultimately trying to sell you things, even though it is free. So just know that annualcreditreport.com is the free one, but also know that if you check it right now, let's say you're 16 years old and you check it, there's a good chance it'll say like, oh, we didn't find anything, or like incomplete. And that's because there's nothing on your credit record. And that's good. That's good. You want to start with a fresh start. So you got your credit report, and then your credit report, all that information feeds to your credit score. And your credit score is kind of like a GPA. It's basically a number based off of the information that's in your transcript, aka your credit report. And so there's a common credit score called the FICO score, and that's the formula that we're looking at here. So these are the different components of a credit score. We got the biggest two pieces are the payment history and the amount owed. So the best things you can do, and this is we'll come back to this in the Q&A, is that if you have something reported to a credit bureau, is making sure that it's being paid on time. That's going to really help build your credit. Yeah, you can take a picture, absolutely. Take a picture of any of these slides with your phone. The other piece, of course, is the amount owed. So if you have some debt, as you tackle debt, that's going to really help. Some people ask, if I get a credit card, should I keep a balance on there? And my answer is no. Like the lower the like if you can keep a zero balance, that's going to be absolutely helpful for your credit. You can see there's some other things that affect your credit as well. Not as big of a factor. We can talk about them if you have questions in the Q&A. Okay. Oh, my computer is going slow. So we're going to watch a quick little video on credit cards now. So give me 1 second to set this up.
That's awesome. I wrote down a question too that I'm going to ask during the Q&A. I'm learning things and I'm taking notes, so I hope those watching are taking notes too.
Yes, we're kind of, I mean, this is quite a sprint. So hopefully everybody, you're hanging with me. Okay, so let me reshare my screen. And Lizzie, I am sharing my computer audio, but if for some reason you can't hear, let me know. Okay, so let's watch a quick little video.
Meet Jasmine. Jasmine is a college student attending State University. Like many college students, Jasmine has a lot of things she needs to buy: books, laundry baskets, food, and so on. And she can pay for those things with two types of money: debit or credit. Debit is money that comes from a personal bank account. Credit is money that is lent to you by your bank. For example, let's say Jasmine has been using a credit card. Each time Jasmine uses the card to buy something, say a $100 textbook, her bank is loaning her the money. While that sounds nice, be warned, the bank isn't giving Jasmine this money for free. They expect her to pay a certain amount of money each month, called interest, if she doesn't totally pay off her balance by the due date. As you can imagine, this can get very expensive very quickly, especially when factoring in the high annual interest rates, or APRs, that are charged by these companies. However, there is a solution to this rather scary problem. As long as Jasmine always pays off her balance in full by the monthly due date, she'll never pay a cent of interest. Jasmine is shocked and thrilled, but still isn't quite sold on credit cards. After all, with all their flaws, are they really worth using? The short answer, as long as you avoid running up a balance, definitely.
Okay, let's just stop there, because a lot of times when we hear about credit cards, we learn about it from our families, and we learn that credit cards are either good or bad. And like a lot of things in personal finance, there's two sides of the coin. Credit cards can be absolutely very dangerous because if you do carry on a balance, as the video showed, then it's one of the most expensive types of interest that you can actually get. And so That's why a lot of people in their 20s and 30s are actually working on paying off credit card debt that they accrued when they were like in their early teens or early 20s. So you want to be really, really careful. But like this video also shared, is credit cards can be helpful for a couple things. One is if you pay on time every month and you pay off your complete balance, like the video said, you pay absolutely 0% interest. You pay nothing, nada. So I want to say that again, if you carry a balance over to the next month on your credit card, you pay a lot of interest. If you pay it off right on time, you pay 0 interest. So some of the benefits of using a credit card are probably twofold. One is it really helps you build credit. And I can't put another way, but your future self will thank you if you can use a credit card and then pay it off on time. Because if in the future, if you're looking to buy a home or even getting a better rate for a car loan, that paying off using a credit card appropriately can really help. The thing that I don't want to talk too much in this class is that over time, there are some other benefits of credit cards. You can get points for different things, but usually early on, that's something to not really worry about. What you should know is that right when you leave high school, you're going to be bombarded by like offers to like open up credit cards. They'll be giving you free t-shirts. They'll be like, hey, there'll be cool people like saying like, hey, like sign up. And so like the video said, just know that this is not your money. It's basically a loan. And so be very, very careful. The way that you can use a credit card responsibly is what we call the Hulu plan. Like Hulu costs what, $6 a month or something? I don't know. We could use this with Netflix or another streaming service as well. But if you basically connect your credit card to auto pay Hulu each month, and then you connect your bank to auto pay your credit card each month, then all of a sudden you're building credit because you're doing just that one transaction a month and it's being paid off on time. That is, remember, building credit, paying on time, keeping a low balance. You're doing a tremendous work to build your credit that way. So we call that the Hulu or the Taco Bell plan. You could do the same thing with a Taco Bell where you get one burrito a month with your credit card, and then for the rest of the month use your debit card. Now, the other thing I should say is for online transactions, some of you may use PayPal, but just be very careful about using a debit card because there's less protection. So actually for purchasing things online, credit cards also can be a good way to go for that.
So what is that? Well, free money for starters.
So let me get back to my slides here. So we talked just to wrap up the credit portion. There's some different resources, and of course there's these fintech companies like Credit Karma or Credit Sesame. Know that they are free. Know that they're very user friendly. The way they make money is by, just like the way Google makes money, is they sell your data and then they try to give you advertisements based on things that you want. Credit Karma is owned by Intuit, which owns TurboTax and QuickBooks and Mint.com. So they have a lot of data on us. So just be mindful of that. But if you're open to that, just know that those can be some good resources. Okay, let me click onward. There's different ways to build credit. Sometimes going to your local credit union, you can ask them, how do I build credit? A secured credit card is one way to start. Our organization also does what we call credit builder loans, where you can make payments each month for a period of usually a year, and then at the end of the term get that money back. And so that's something. So there's a lot of ways that you can build credit. The final thing I want to talk about on credit is freezing your credit. So here's the deal. We've all heard of big data and data breaches. There's actually been credit bureaus that have had data breaches. And so a good kind of safe, consumer-friendly best practice now is that when you're not trying to access housing or trying to access like a loan for a car, is to freeze your credit when you're 18. What that means is that then if a data breach happens, you're more protected, and then also you're also more protected against identity theft as well. And so the steps for freezing your credit is really quick. All you do is go to the 3 credit bureau websites and then follow the questions about protecting your credit. Just know that they're going to ask you for passwords, sometimes a PIN. Don't lose that PIN because it can also be a very big pain if you lose your PIN. So let me ask you all to put in the chat. We're going to transition to talk real quickly about debt and loans, and then we're going to wrap up our presentation. Oh, we got one more thing. We'll talk for a minute about saving as well. So real quickly, what are some of the most common debts that young adults, especially I would say age 18 to 22, tend to get in? If you have ideas, put them in the chat. Lizzie, you can play too if you want.
I know, I want to.
Okay.
Loans?
Yeah. So
I was gonna
yeah, student loans is absolutely a big one.
Okay.
So student loans is definitely a big one. So let me throw, these probably look familiar. Probably the big 3 are credit cards. We just talked about those, car loans, and student loans. So again, my goodness, we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about all these things, but credit cards, we've talked about it. Car loans, just a couple of thoughts. If you can save for a car, remember, then you can avoid getting a car loan. And for somebody, so there's a lot of value, especially on your first car, to try not to get something too expensive. Big car loans can really just strap young adults with debt. So let's say you get a full-time job and you're like, awesome, you go down to, and you see what you can get pre-qualified for, or you even go to the car lot and they're like, we can get you in this car today. Just be really careful because sometimes it take a big slice of your monthly pie. You probably have some friends or people at schools, you're like, wow, that's a nice car. How did they get that car? Either their parents helped them out or they probably got themselves a pretty big car loan. And so just be really careful about that. If you do need a car loan, again, going to a local credit union is a really good place to start. See if you have a family cosigner, that can be helpful too. Usually you'll find better rates there than actually going directly to the lot, because especially those used car dealers, they make a lot of money, not just from selling you the car, but also selling you the financing with the car. Student loans, again, how can I talk about that? How can I talk about that in 30 seconds? What I'll say is this, is that you'll be presented with different financial aid packages. Always lean to getting federal student loans before private student loans, because after school, you'll have a lot more repayment options with federal student loans. But of course, before that, see if you can get free money. Now, medical bills, there's things that happen, or like, let's say you get a cell phone and you weren't able to pay and now you have some collections from that. Like, that's just part of adulting, and it's part of working on a plan to see how you can attack that. Sometimes with medical bills, you can reach out to the hospital and see if they have any options. So those are just a couple thoughts on debts. The big thing though on loans is this: shop the APR, the annual percent rate. A lot of times the interest rate may not capture all the fees associated with what you're looking at. So the APR, or sometimes with savings APY, that is what you can kind of shop apples to apples from different offers. And so a lot of times, going back to the car loan example, they might lead with, hey, what kind of monthly payment can you afford? Well, that has nothing to do with the cost of the loan. So you want to know what the cost of the loan is. Just like they say, show me the Carfax, tell them, show me the APR. Okay, so let's just spend a minute on savings. And let me start with this little image here. We got a glass of water and we got a piggy bank. So the interesting thing about savings, and this is a big principle that we talk about in our Youth Financial Foundations class, as well as all of the Dev Northwest Financial Wellbeing workshops, is starting to think about savings as different buckets. We talked earlier that if you have different goals, those are kind of different saving categories, right? Saving for education might be different than saving for like, like after COVID going on a road trip with friends or something. And so that's a different category than this third category. And this is what we call emergency savings. So we need to start thinking about emergency savings and savings for goals as two different categories because the savings work completely different. So saving for emergencies are like when those, Lizzie, can I swear?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay. When those oh shit things happen, right? You're just like, oh shit, why did this happen? Why did this happen right now? That's a big part of adulthood, is that these emergencies or these mini emergencies happen quite frequently, and we haven't planned for them in our spending plan and budget. So one idea is actually to build a little bit of buffer in your spending plan so that you can have space for those emergencies. But the other thing is actually to actually put money aside specifically for emergencies. And so you call that your emergency savings. Now, a lot of us do that, but we don't realize we're doing that because we have a checking account and a savings account. So that's something you might have a savings account right now, if through a custodial savings account through your family. But then when you turn 18, you'll probably want a transactional account, a checking account and a savings account. And a lot of times, if we have an emergency, we just steal from our savings account and pay off our checking account. So that's hey, I just want to say, good first step. You've got a savings account and you've got a checking account. But the next step is to actually make sure to divide your emergency savings for your saving for goals. So let's take a look at an image here. If we were to get a job, a lot of times we might have our income get direct deposited to our bank or credit union. So it might go into a checking account. And if we took another step, this is really, really powerful, is each month to set a little bit of aside into our savings account. If you can do that, even if you can only do $5, the activity, the muscle of actually practicing setting up automations between your accounts can really help you save more down the line, because automating savings is one of the best ways and the strongest ways that people can save once you kind of are out of school and you have a proper full-time job. But the other thing you can do is sometimes you can ask your employer you're like, I don't even want to see the money that's going into savings because then I'm more likely to not touch it. So you can say, can I actually do multiple direct deposits or ACHs? And so sometimes your employer might be able to do that. And so you don't even need to see that money going into saving. But then the third idea is actually to have money going directly to some other place. So we put an online banking savings account because typically they have higher interest rates than other places. But it's the idea of actually having multiple savings accounts, one for emergencies and one for some of these big goals that you're working towards. There's lots of different ways that you can strategize to save. I'm a big fan of this game called the 52-week plan, where you actually save $1 the first week, $2 the second week, $3, and so forth. If you do that for a year, you've saved over $1,300. So there's a lot of cool ways to do it. But the biggest thing you can do is automate. Even the good old coin jar is a really good principle. Like, let's say you've got actually a coin jar that you use to save money. What if somebody in a class once said, you know what, I actually got, instead of just a jar, I got like a really big jar and I duct taped it so I couldn't see the money going in. And so as the money was growing, I really didn't know, and I was less likely to rate it. Or some other students have said, you know what, I noticed that my coin jar was doing so good that I actually started putting like cash in there. Like every now and then I'd put $1 bill or a $5 bill, and then all of a sudden I really saw it like build a lot quicker as well. So again, this is something we talk about. I would encourage you to take our the Youth Financial Foundations through Connected Lane County, because we dive a lot deeper into different strategies for saving. But those are a couple. And the biggest thing is if you can just get started saving, you will have, it's not about how much you're saving. It's about the practice of saving. We'll talk in the class about compound interest and the power of time with money, but it's even more than that. Is actually having systems for saving is what really kind of can be really powerful for the rest of your life. Okay, so that's like doing an oil change for your personal finances and like setting it up. So think about it. To review, we talked about making a budget. I said the B word, making a spending plan, figuring out what your needs and wants are, and how can you put your goals inside of that. We talked about credit, and we might talk in some of the questions about first steps about building credit, like credit builder loans or secured credit cards. But the main thing is paying on time. That's going to be the best thing that helps your credit. We talked about avoiding debts and realizing some of the biggest debt traps that young adults face. We also talked about savings, and really the most powerful thing of savings is to figure out some way to automate money from one account to the other to an account that you're less likely to touch. So if you don't have an account right now, a piggy bank jar is a good way to start. But once you get an account at a credit union or a bank, then definitely set up an automatic payment. $1, $5, $200 makes no difference. Just make sure that you're saving. And so let's turn it over to questions and answers.
That's great. We do have a few here. Well done, Ross. Thank you. That was a lot of information.
Oh my goodness.
We have.
I gotta get some water.
Yeah, yes, please. We have like 20 minutes to answer these questions. So please don't hold back, students that are watching live. Jenna M would like to know, if I want to apply for a credit card, what other things should I look for aside from interest rate? And
Okay.
I would add to that, what red flags should we look for?
Yeah, so a couple things. Probably for your first card, you want to, like, I would just recommend going through a place that you know is reputable. So if you already have a prior relationship with a local credit union, that's a good first place to start. But yeah, the things that you want to watch out for are the hidden fees. And so you'll get a disclosure when you're shopping, and they'll talk about some of the possible fees. But especially for your first card, you want to make sure you find something that has no annual fee. And that's not, there's a lot of the commercials that you'll see on TV have really good benefits, but then there's annual fees associated with them. So that's the first thing. And then of course, we already talked about the APR and making sure, and again, as a young adult, you're probably going to get on the higher range of the APRs, but remember, it doesn't matter so long as you pay on time. And those are the main things, is just make sure, avoid junk fees, deal with reputable places, and yeah, so I think that's a good place to start. A lot of times your first card will be a secured card, and I referenced that real quickly, but let me just go into a little more detail. A secured card means that you're actually putting money down. In essence, you're taking a loan from yourself, you're securing it yourself, and then over time, you can kind of graduate into an unsecured card. There are companies that have, especially for college age people, that like they have kind of like starter credit cards, because they want to get you kind of hooked early on. And that are unsecured. But again, so long as you're paying it on time, you should be good. Also know that the Target or the Walmart cards, the store cards, don't build you credit as well as, a more of a traditional Visa, MasterCard.
I feel like I've noticed too that most like in-store credit cards have really high interest rates. So if you do
Yep.
payment or you do carry over a balance, they're going to get you.
Yep. So for credit building, those are, we would say, not the first place to go. There have been some people who that's the only thing that they're able to qualify for, and so they start that way. But for most of you, again, this isn't something that you're really looking into until you're 18. But yeah, the store cards don't build credit like the other things. Also, just know yourself. Like you could even go through your first couple years of college or all of college or whatever you're doing after school. You could be 25 and get your first card. And it's definitely, this isn't something that you need to do first thing when you're 18. You just need to know that there are pros and cons and how to use credit cards wisely.
Absolutely. So there's another question in the chat that's related. Why should I get a credit card if I already have a debit card?
Yeah, so for a couple reasons. One is that if you're looking to build credit, unfortunately, debit cards do not build credit. Debit cards are fantastic for, they're like a transactional card. They allow you to just, you go to Freddy's and you need to pay for something. A debit card's great. But a credit card, it's almost like a little bit of a game, is you're just using the credit card once a month so that you're building credit. So I would, you could even literally, like, if you do the Hulu or the Taco Bell strategy, you just use it once, put it in the freezer and don't touch it. Use your debit card as your main transactional card. But like I said, there was one other thing, is that for online, if you're purchasing something online, it's a lot safer to use a credit card, because if they get your debit card information and like they suck your account, you have a lot more protections with a credit card than with a debit card. So yeah, so those are probably the two biggest reasons.
Okay, got it. So with a debit card, if there is fraud, that person is literally like taking money out of your account. And I feel like it's often hard for banks to come back and give you back those funds. But for a credit card, when you report fraud, they can cancel charges and it's no real harm to you if you catch it.
That's right. You have some consumer protections with a debit card, but they expire a lot quicker than with a credit card. And like Lizzie said, with a credit card, you're contesting something on something that actually wasn't your money. So they also are incentivized to make it right. In many cases, and I've had this happen personally, where somehow your number gets stolen online, the credit card company will identify it and they'll be like, did you do this transaction? And then they'll shut down your account and give you a new card. So there's a lot more kind of fraud monitoring with credit cards.
There was a heat wave 2 summers ago and we didn't have air conditioning in our apartment. And my partner and I went to Home Depot at like 10 o'clock at night and bought a like $400 air conditioning we had been saving for, and my credit card was instantly shut down because they're like, there's no way you're spending $400 at Home Depot. But it was
Yeah, one other thing, just to like over answer your question, at some point in the next 4 years, you might travel internationally, like you might study abroad, and it's always a lot better to use a credit card. Just because of the protection that it has. You do want to make sure a couple things, to tell them that you're going to be out of the country, and then B, make sure that there's no foreign transaction fees, which some credit cards have, and then many do not. So yeah, those are a couple reasons, but I understand the kind of the crux of the person's question is like, can I be using my debit card for most things? And the answer is yeah, you can definitely use your debit card for most of your transactions, just not the online ones.
And it won't be building your credit.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So there is a question here that was actually one of the questions I had for you as well. What's the difference? We've heard you say banks and credit unions. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's a good question. Does anybody in the chat want to take a stab? What is the difference between a bank and a credit union? I'll pause for a second.
I really wish we had Jeopardy music. We've done a couple times.
Well, so the difference between a credit union and a bank, both of them are, comes something in the chat. Bank profits go to the bank, credit unions go to the customers. Yeah, so I'll say it very similar to that. So banks are for-profit entities, and usually they're guided by, their shareholders, right? That's how for-profit companies work. There's also community banks, which which can be really, really great financial institutions, and we shouldn't kind of confused with
Well,
some of the bigger banks.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, credit unions are not for profits. And so, so to that, to the what they said in the chat is that in some cases you may find some less junk fees, lower costs of some financial products, and typically you'll see them staffed a little bit more. There's not one right or wrong. Like you can have a relationship with a bank and it can be just great, or you can have a relationship with a credit union and it can be just great as well. Sometimes people are really like they want like they really like the online banking interface of one financial institution. Sometimes they like the location of ATMs. And one good thing to know about credit unions is a lot of them are part of a network that that allows you, even if you were to move and go off to school in another state, you'd still be able to access your money from that credit union with no with no fees or whatever. So I think that's one myth, is that some people feel like they need to engage with a national bank because they see more ATMs around, but that's probably not quite true. The big thing to know is that your money in both places, they both, you know, they both have checking accounts, they both have savings accounts. You want to shop and make sure that you can find one that doesn't cost you any money,
Yeah.
that you're not paying for a savings account or a checking account, which some have been known to do that,
Yeah.
that the junk fees are not as big. And do know that both of them are protected by insurance. Like if a credit union or a bank went out of business, your money is safe in both places. The big thing is you definitely want to open up a savings account and a checking account at a bank or a credit union, as opposed to not. Because if you're not, like if I went to the local big box store and I'm cashing my check and they charge me a couple bucks each time I cash that those fees really add up. So one of the big reasons to use a bank or credit union is your money is completely safe. Like it's much safer than money under the mattress. And you should be able to access your money for no cost. Like that's stupid. And that's where some of these more kind of predatory financial services come in. So yeah, but when we get down to it, banks and credit unions serve similar purposes, but credit unions are not for profits.
Okay, great. I see one more. We've been talking a lot about credit. So I see one more question about credit, and then we can move on to something else. Are there other ways to build my credit score aside from credit cards? And
Yes.
you could name a few. And then what's an ideal credit score?
Yes, you're right. Let me take the second question first, and then I'll come back to the first part. So I didn't mention that. A credit score typically is anywhere from 300 to 850. Like a very, very good credit score would be anything like 760 or above. So let me just tell you, like, I know there might be some like A students out there who want to have like, I want to have an 800 and 850. It's just not possible to get an 850 credit score. If you're over, you know, if you're in the high 700s, you have a really good score. Now, know this also, that when you're building credit for the first time, when you're just getting started, of course your score is not going to be good. It'll take time to get there. So you shouldn't expect results overnight. Remember, payment history is a big piece of that. So yeah, so it's some different ways to build credit. It's a great question. You know, we've talked about a secured credit card, or credit cards, either secured or unsecured. As long as, you know, use it once a month, pay it off on time. That's a great way to build credit. I also talked about credit builder loans. So that's something that our organization does. Again, talk to your credit union and see what sort of credit building things that they can support with. The credit cards build your revolving trade lines, and these credit loans build your installment trade lines, which I know we're going a little bit into the deep end, but just know that your credit score likes a mix of both. So in some ways there could be value to doing a secured card plus a credit builder loan. The other thing is that there are certain things that you get that actually report those transactions to a credit a credit bureau. So let's say that you were able to, you're looking to buy a car, and maybe the car is like, let's just say it's kind of a clunker. Let's say it's $3,000 or $4,000 or something like that. And you're like, I've saved up and I could pay for this in cash. Well, there could be an argument to be made to actually get to pay for most of it in cash, and then get a really, really small loan from a local credit union. Again, only if the interest is low. So it could be helpful if you have a cosigner, and then make those installment payments over a couple years, and that will help build credit. So the big thing that you want to be mindful of building credit is the things that we talked about, the secured credit card, credit builder loans, a very low interest car loan. Those are all consumer friendly because they have low interest or free. The things you want to avoid are like places like a rent-to-own store that says, hey, we'll help you build credit. But remember, they're helping you build credit at a cost, and that is a very, very high cost, a fee for buying something from that place. So the main thing is when you're building credit is you want to make sure I guess I would call nurture both a revolving trade line and installment trade line, and do it in the cheapest way possible. And don't stress about it too much. I mean, like this is a long game, and if you know, and I should have said that, like, let's say you go through a spat of life where like you accidentally missed a payment or two, or like, you know, you lost your job and you're having trouble making payments. Just know that time heals all with respect to your credit, and so you can always kind of start back up again.
That's a great point. So one thing that we did not touch on today, and I don't think we should have added it to the agenda because there was plenty to cover, but it's taxes. And we've been hosting interviews with students where we're really just having a conversation with them. And one of the questions that we asked is, what's most scary to you about life after high school? And what we keep hearing is taxes.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if maybe you could just touch briefly on, when does someone start paying taxes? And are there any is there helpful software out there that folks could use so that you are not sitting down with a pen and paper and filling out your taxes?
Yeah, those are great questions. So here's what's interesting is, like, you may not have, like, when you get your first job, you may not have to pay taxes because you made under a certain amount. I believe it's about $12,000. So you probably are not going to have to pay taxes. The reason that you want to do your taxes is because, what's it called? It's called a tax return. You had money set aside that, especially if you're just getting started, you're probably going to get money back when you do your taxes. So once you start making money, you definitely do your taxes. Now, I said that 12K number. If you're actually a contracted worker, it's a lot lower. So it's under 1,000. So it's under, I'm trying to think what it is right now. It's 500 or 600. So, you know, if you're a babysitter and they provide you a 1099, you know, they're submitting that on their taxes. So you want to make sure that you submit that. So the bottom line is that if you're making money, you do want to do your taxes. And so to answer, Lizzie, your second question, yeah, I mean, the very first time that you're doing your taxes, it would be awesome to sit down and do it with a friend or a parent or somebody of leadership in your circle that has done it before, because it sounds scary, but it'll be okay. What are those t-shirts like? Keep calm, you know, like, yeah, it's gonna be okay. In some ways, it's almost like a little like, it's just a lot of like, you just plug in numbers. So what happens when you get a job is you'll be given at the end of the year something called a W-2. And that W-2 has information that you basically just plug in to whatever online tax software that you use. And then they'll like ask you the right questions and you'll follow the steps. So like in a quick minute, that's what I can say is that, like, I actually have confidence in you doing your taxes for the first time, because between the set tax software just saying, okay, well, now get out your W-2.
Yeah.
Okay, what does it say on line 1? Okay, let's move on to line 2. Like, it can be really that straightforward.
Yeah.
later in life, your taxes might get more complicated, but that's not true right now, and that's fine. As far as where to go, so actually, if you could have Netflix that has the Patriot Act did a great piece on taxes, and this is something that I want to stress as well, is to find your online tax software, go through the IRS website. So Google IRS Free File, and then follow the links, and they will link you to different tax softwares that you've heard of. It's all the ones that you've seen commercials for. They offer it for free. The thing is that if you just Google that company name and you click on the link on the Google, sometimes it's actually mostly free, but not free. Like sometimes, like, oops, now you have to pay this. So go through the IRS website. Now, this is specifically just for your federal taxes. Some software allows you to do your state tax return for free as well. So that might be something that you want to look into. But if you are using a software that just allows your federal free, but not your state free, well, you could always prep your state, and then instead of submitting it through the software, you could just print it out and send it to the Oregon Department of Revenue, and then it's free. So that's the big thing that we advocate for, is that you really can do your taxes for free. There's a great organization locally that throughout the country. In fact, it's the biggest volunteer organization in the country, ARP tax aid sites, that actually have tax volunteers helping people do their taxes. Originally, they were more geared for people of advanced age, shall we say, but it is open to anyone. The reason I just want to stress the online software is because I believe already the ARP tax aid sites are almost booked for the year. And secondly, you all are younger, like you're not scared of technology. Some of the people that are older are a little bit more scared of technology. So again, go IRS Free File, find a company that you do, search some reviews, find one that you find is reliable, hopefully one without a state with a fee for your state return, and then do it with a buddy or a parent or somebody in leadership in your circle.
That's great. Yeah, I remember also being nervous, and it was those sites are so user friendly that they literally walk you through every step, and they keep you informed. And yeah, I'm a big proponent for them as well. Okay, so we are at the 3 o'clock hour. Thank you so very much, Ross. I do want to remind the students who are tuning in and who will be tuning in later that Ross mentioned the financial foundation courses that his organization puts on. Our organization is working with Dev Northwest. We bought up a bunch of those seats, and so we have seats reserved for Lane County high schoolers and youth and eligible programs to take that course for free. So the next cohort is on April 21st. It's a 5-week course. I think you meet once a week for 2 hours. And everything Ross just went over, you're going to go over in way greater detail, plus I'm sure much more. So
much more.
Take advantage of those courses.
Yeah, and we have a lot of fun too. I mean, I think some of this is a little bit scary, but like it's really powerful. There's a lot of things it's like you don't know what you don't know, and to get a good firm footing, kind of like this is like an incredibly great time to get a good strong footing. So so we really look forward to seeing many of you in those classes.
That sounds great. You can find that information on our website, connectedlane.org. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day and rest of your week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, Rob.